First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now the full test will begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, as the recording is not played twice. Now listen carefully to the conversation and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, is this the right place to sign up for the cooking course?
Yes, that's right. I'm Liz. Would you like to join us?
Hi Liz, I'm Luke. Yes, I would, but I can only come at certain times. The best time for me would be on Thursday evenings.
Well, we have a beginner's class then, starting at 6 p.m. for an hour and a half.
That would be fine.
So I'll take some details from you, if that's okay.
Of course.
So, what's your name to begin with?
It's Luke Ashley.
Is that Ashley spelled A-S-H-L-E-Y?
No, it's A-S-H-L-E-I-G-H.
Thanks. And do you have a home phone number?
No, I'm afraid I only have a mobile.
That's fine. Can I take that, please?
It's 07770 376 284.
Now, we'll need your home address to send the invoice to. Is that okay?
Oh, yes. You don't pass on my address to any third parties, do you?
Oh, no. Don't worry about that.
Good. I live at 14 Albert Road.
Is that in Bradstock?
Yes, that's right.
And can I have the postal code, please?
It's BR6 8AF.
Thanks. Now, the course fee is £300. How would you like to pay that?
I'm not sure I can pay that all at once.
You can pay with monthly instalments on direct debit if you like, but I don't have the paperwork for that with me today. We can do it just before your first lesson, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yes, that's fine.
Before the conversation continues, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
So, as I said earlier, the cooking lessons will be on Thursdays from 6 p.m. and the lessons are an hour and a half.
How many lessons are in the course?
The course duration is 3 months and there are 15 lessons. We feel that this is long enough to give you the basic knowledge that you'll need. You missed the first one last week, but I know that your teacher makes videos of her lessons, so you'll be able to catch up on the first lesson online. You'll have to ask her, though, where she posts the videos.
OK, I won't forget to ask her. Can you let me know a little bit about the course?
Of course. The beginner's course is aimed to take you from knowing nothing, or very little, to having a good practical knowledge of cooking basics. There is also a focus in every lesson on being able to produce at least one particular type of meal.
What different types of food culture will we look at?
After some of the basics have been covered, the teacher will look at some basic Indian, Thai and Chinese cooking. There is not too much though. It's best to enroll on a specialty course for those things once you are confident in your kitchen.
So what are the basics that I'll learn about?
You'll cover essentials like baking, basic sauces, soups, cooking meat and fish correctly, and how to make puddings. There is also a strong focus on preparing vegetables and cooking them in different ways, as this is the basis of a healthy diet. We do some specific vegetarian and vegan meals as well.
Do I need to have any special equipment when I come?
We supply nearly everything, though we ask you to bring your own apron. We don't supply these as they should be cleaned for every lesson, and it creates a massive amount of laundry for us to supply a clean one for every student in every class.
That should be fine. I got one and a cooking book for my birthday from my brother, as he knew I was starting to learn to cook. What about ingredients?
They will all be supplied, and they're all included in the price of the course.
Good.
One final thing is that the last lesson is a little longer and ends with a big dinner. Every student can invite a guest, and everyone will eat the food that is prepared that evening.
That is the end of section 1. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a woman giving some information at a village meeting. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully to the information talk and answer questions 11 to 15.
Hello everyone, and thanks for coming to our village meeting. I'm Alexis Laker, and most of you know me and my role as spokesperson for the village council. As you know, your village council recently conducted a door-to-door survey of the village residents to find out what developments to our village would be desirable. I'm very happy that we had an excellent response rate, which illustrates how much our village means to everyone. Now, one of the principal things that has been noticed is that the village needs a playground for children. As residents may remember, we used to have one next to the town park. Unfortunately, this had to be closed due to a road widening development to ease the passage of cars and lorries in the village, and plans to create a new one were shelved due to cutbacks on funding by the county council. We have been looking at different possible locations for a new kids' playground, and we have 3 possibilities. The first is on some council-owned land around the back of the village hall. This obviously has the advantage of already being owned by us, but there is currently a small building on the site that has some historical significance. There will probably be a problem relating to planning to pull this building down. The next option for the children's playground is to buy the farmer's land that adjoins the village general store. It's such a small plot that the farmer can't do much with it, and our initial approaches to him have been met favourably. As there are buildings on either side of the plot, there shouldn't be too many problems obtaining permission to construct the playground there. The final option is at the entrance of the village, across from the post office. There is a derelict shed on the land, which should present no problems for demolition, and the fact that the local school is only a 5-minute walk away on the same side of the road is another plus. What we want to do is for you to fill out feedback forms and give your opinions about which site to choose. We don't just want to know which one you want, but also why.
You now have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen to the rest of the information talk and answer questions 16 to 20.
So, we also found out about a lot of other things regarding your views on the village. The first thing was about the shouting outside the youth club on Friday and Saturday evenings. This has come up before. Council members went to the youth club just yesterday, and we met the organisers and also the children. The kids said that they would make more effort to be quiet when they leave the club. A lot of you have heard that the village post office may be closing as part of the cuts that are being made around the country. Your village council has made inquiries and found out that the closure is as yet not certain. In order to secure our post office's continuation, we have sent a letter to the county council and our Member of Parliament, explaining the need we still have for a post office in the village. A lot of people have made comments about the annual village fair, which is held each year in the middle of July. Unfortunately, the last few years have been affected by rain, and people have suggested that we switch the fair to August. This has been discussed carefully, and the decision is to stick with how it is, as we feel that many people could be away in August on summer holidays, and of course the weather in this country is simply unpredictable and is likely to be as bad in August as in July. People have pointed out that the site for the upcoming elections for the village council will have to be changed, as the village hall has been closed due to a leaky roof. The school headmaster has kindly given permission to use his reception as a voting area on the voting day. As we don't have too extensive a population, it's estimated this won't overwhelm the school's activities. If it is too busy when you arrive, however, be patient and wait your turn. Finally, many people brought up the problem of the power cuts experienced last winter. You'll be glad to hear that the electrical substation that caused the problems has been overhauled, and we shouldn't be faced with this problem again.
That is the end of section 2. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear 3 students discussing a project that they will do as part of a competition. First, you will have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 27.
Hi, Johnny. Hi, Magda. Are you ready to discuss our project?
Hi, Amy. Yes, I am.
Me too, Amy. Let's do it.
Great. Right. So we're doing a project on using modern wind power technology to work at a domestic site. We want to enter our project in the Alternative Technologies competition that the local newspaper is running. Johnny, you start.
Well, as you know, our advantage is that our project is based on technology that already exists, and there are commercial models available for domestic wind power generation.
Won't that go against us?
I don't think so. The existing commercial models are fairly expensive. What we're trying to do is create a much cheaper apparatus that can be used by anyone.
So, our cheaper model will do everything that these expensive commercial models can do?
From what I've read up on regarding this, we won't be able to completely match the commercial models. For example, one of the advantages to home wind power generation is that excess power generated can be sold back to the power companies. Unfortunately, only certain approved models are permitted to be included in this scheme, and they must be fitted by certified engineers. Our apparatus won't fulfill these obligations. People will be able to generate their own power, but they won't be able to get the national grid to buy any excess production.
I see. Anyway, people will be able to save lots by just generating for themselves.
Exactly.
One thing I want to bring up is whether we want to focus on freestanding wind turbines or one that could be attached to the roofs of people's homes.
Well, the idea of putting a wind turbine on people's roofs seems like a good one, but the problem is that these don't produce enough power to make people truly independent of the grid and produce all of their own power.
The trouble for our project is that the freestanding turbines cost a lot more, and that will probably apply to any that we create. I suggest that we focus on ones attached to a roof and do our best to make it as efficient as possible. It doesn't have to totally replace reliance on the official supply. If we make it cheap enough, it should be worthwhile to supplement people's use of the national power grid.
So, what are some of the things we should look out for when we're researching?
Well, the type of turbine that will be mounted on the roof. The generator that converts the magnetic field created by the turbine rotation into electricity is usually housed in the base of that, just under the roof. This can come in different styles. After that, there will be an inverter, which will change the current from DC to AC. AC current can then be used anywhere in the building.
That's very helpful. We now know what kind of things to look out for.
You missed one thing, Johnny. After the current has been converted from DC to AC, the electricity supply will need to pass through a fuse box so that any power surges can be safely dealt with. It should be located on the ground floor so it can be easily accessed. This should be remembered when researching the different models that we choose.
Oh yes, well remembered, Magda.
You now have some time to look at questions 28 to 30. Now listen to the rest of the discussion and answer questions 28 to 30.
So how should we split up the initial work?
I think we should research the technology that existing models use and see which is the best for us to base our apparatus on.
That seems like a good idea.
My early research shows that there seems to be 3 good roof models on the market. We could take one each and come back and discuss our findings. In that way, we can choose one on which to base our design or incorporate ideas from all of them.
Is that allowed in the competition rules?
I think what we're doing is a fairly standard commercial process. We'll be looking at machinery that isn't covered by a patent. Everything will be in the public domain, and our apparatus will be constructed from scratch.
Good.
So can we meet again a week from today at the same time and place to discuss our findings?
That's a good idea. How long after that do we have before we'll need to have our apparatus ready for the competition?
We'll have 6 months exactly. That should be enough time to acquire the parts we need, assemble everything, and test it.
Can we find a sponsor for the buying of the parts?
Amy, you were looking into that, weren't you?
That's right. I have a meeting with the business manager at my bank. He seemed interested in helping us out if we can put the bank logo on our apparatus and on any documentation.
Well, that seems fair enough.
Excellent. So see you next week. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Bye.
That is the end of section 3. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture on genetically modified food. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this lecture on genetically modified foods. Genetically modified, or GM foods, have been a controversial subject for some years, and this trend looks to continue. Genetically modified food is food that has been produced from organisms that have had their DNA changed by genetic engineering. It's done by inserting foreign genes from plants or animals into an organism's genetic code. The genetic modification process starts by identifying a plant that has a required characteristic. The significant gene producing this characteristic is located and cut out of the plant's DNA. To insert the gene into the cells of the plant that is being modified, the gene needs to be attached to a carrier, which is a piece of bacterial DNA called a plasmid. Only a small number of cells in the plant being modified will actually take up the new gene. To find out which ones, the gene package often also includes a marker gene to identify them. In the next stage, the bacterium carrier is allowed to reproduce to create many copies of the gene package, and the gene packages are then transferred into the plant being modified. This is usually done in one of two ways. It can be done by attaching them to tiny particles of gold or tungsten and firing them at high speed into the plant tissue. Gold or tungsten are used because they are chemically inert, which means they won't react with their surroundings. Gene package transfer can also be done by using a soil bacterium to take it in when it infects the plant tissue. The bacterium is modified to make sure it doesn't become active when it is taken into the new plant. The plant tissue that has taken up the genes is then grown into full-size GM plants. The GM plants are checked extensively to make sure that the new genes are present and are working as they should. This is done by growing the whole plants, allowing them to seed, planting them, and growing the plant again, while monitoring the gene that has been inserted. This process is repeated several times. The benefits of GM foods depend on the alteration in the genetic code that takes place. These include corn plants with the gene that makes them resistant to insect attack, or soybeans with a modified fatty acid content that makes the oil better suited for frying. Plants that use less water to grow have also been developed, so they are more suitable for changing climatic conditions. Many of the food safety issues raised by GM foods are equally applicable to foods produced by conventional means. GM foods are, however, subjected to a safety assessment before they are permitted in the food supply. The safety assessment includes extensive analyses of the composition of the food, a full consideration of the safety of any new substances that have been introduced into the food, as well as a thorough characterization of the genetic changes that have been introduced into the organism from which the food is derived. This ensures that any GM food that is approved is as safe as regular food, including in the long term. Post-market monitoring is often suggested as a means of demonstrating whether long-term adverse health effects may be associated with the consumption of GM foods. It has been recognized internationally that the use of pre-market safety assessment already provides assurance that GM food safety is comparable to its conventional counterpart in relation to health risks and benefits. Therefore, the likelihood of identifying long-term effects specifically attributable to GM foods would be very low. Moreover, the practicality of using post-market monitoring to assess the long-term human health impacts of consuming GM foods has not been established. Many chronic health problems have complex causes, and it is unlikely that observational studies could identify such effects specifically related to GM foods. The same also applies to the identification of potential long-term beneficial health effects. Concerns are occasionally expressed that the practice of feeding GM plant material to livestock may pose an indirect risk to humans through consumption of meat, milk, and eggs. As many feeds are derived from the same GM crops that are used for human consumption, for example corn or soybean, they have typically already been assessed for their human food safety. In the case of GM plants intended primarily for use as feed, it is now standard practice for these to also undergo food safety assessment and approval for human food use. This recognizes it may be impossible to prevent inadvertent commingling of plant material during cultivation, transport, and storage, and so ensures GM plant use as feed will not pose indirect risk to humans.
That is the end of section 4. You will now have half a minute to check your answers. That is the end of listening test 20. In the Ielts test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer.